Shane, it's great to catch up with you today. Normally, we meet at Carrabba's each year to preview the upcoming BYU football season. So I'm grateful that we're meeting today and getting in an extra meeting this year.
I'm looking forward to it as well. I will say that that this is an excellent meeting that we're having today, but it's hard to substitute for the Carrabba's meeting because it also includes food. So
Yeah, it's hard to beat for sure. This will be the best we can do without that delicious bread and the balsamic and oil. Shane, you've had an incredible career, and as you think back as your time as an academic, a researcher, teacher, consultant, administrator, are there two to three simple, practical, underappreciated lessons you've learned that you'd most like to pass along to others?
yeah, it's a great question, and I don't know whether you'd say that I had a successful career or not, but I'll say I'm an interested observer in successful careers, and that's probably the best I can offer. There, when I think about sort of the overarching what sort of undergirds the really three ideas that I have for what might make for someone to be successful that are really underappreciated. I think it boils down to the difference between talent and success. And I think all too often we might in our daily lives attribute way too much to talent in terms of success. When I was in grad school and I looked at all of the people around me who were had a whole spectrum of talent levels, right? There were some who were really quite solid and strong. I call them journeymen, all the way up to these people who I really think are geniuses and had crazy amounts of talent. Uh, they didn't all arrive at an equivalent level of success. that those who were journeymen didn't necessarily translate to the lower end of the success spectrum, and those who were the geniuses didn't necessarily amount to the highest level of success on the success spectrum. And I think what really defined who translated or sort of was punching above their weight in the success spectrum, regardless of where they started on the talent spectrum, were three things. The first was their willingness to work hard, the work ethic, if you will. The second was kind of their view of themselves and realistic view of themselves. I might label that even as humility, and intellectual humility in particular. And the third is one that I think may be one of the most underappreciated elements in life, which is kindness. So those are the three things that I thought of when you asked me this question, and we were visiting after our last Carrabba's visit. So I'll start with one, which is hard work and work ethic. You hear it a lot, but I really think it's seen as a bygone virtue, one that doesn't manifest itself in today's world. I think so many people have gravitated towards the work smarter, not harder mentality that they've abandoned working hard. And when I look back at all of the colleagues that I had in grad school in particular, that's kind of the defining moment for me as a student. And I've seen people go from start to finish, or at least start to where they are today. We had two guys in our graduate program, and I won't name their names because for all I know, they're going to be listening to this podcast. I know that the listenership is huge, so they could be listeners. But we had two guys. We had one guy who I would describe as very much a journeyman. He fell on the lowest end of the pure talent spectrum. And then we had another guy who was absolutely out of this world brilliant. I mean, he had IQ that was off the charts, and he tested his whole life in terms of exceeding kind of all kind of standards for intelligence. He was crazy smart. So, but all throughout graduate schools, person A, I'll call him Jeff, and person B, I'll call him Tom. Person A, Jeff, he worked his tail off. He was the first one in the office in the morning, and he was the last one in the office to leave at the end of the day. He was there every single day. It didn't matter whether it was a vacation, whatever. He worked hard. And when he wasn't there, he worked hard at home, like on his hobbies, on his family. He just was always working hard. Tom, on the other hand, he knew he was going to ace the test. He was the smartest guy in the room, and he knew he was the smartest guy in the room. And you look at both those, and the amount of time they invested was absolutely opposite of one another. Tom invested very little. Jeff invested a ton. Today, I look at both of those guys, and Jeff is wildly accomplished. He went to his first job, which really was kind of a mediocre job out of a PhD program. But he flourished, and he outshined everyone at his first job. He was then recruited to be the lead at an Ivy League university in a research department, which is like the best of all jobs in statistics. And he got that. It was all based on hard work. Tom, on the other hand, if you look at him today, he is employed as kind of a menial laborer in a research organization, not in a high-level position. So their success was exactly the opposite of what I think you would predict. And it all came down to an amazing work ethic for those two guys. I'm amazed. It's sort of what you would, it's like a feel-good story. Like the guy that doesn't have much talent can work, and he actually wins the race. And that's what happened for these two. So that's the first thing I think of how you might translate how the talent spectrum doesn't necessarily correlate directly to the success spectrum.
Yeah, I think it's so important to have models of this in our minds so that we can see the value of hard work. And when I think of hard work, I think of my brother. My brother, he was talented physically, but he wasn't the tallest, and he wasn't the strongest, and he wasn't the highest jumper. But in basketball, he was one of those guys that would full court press the whole game. And he would literally, I mean, he would get home from practice and he was just dead, and he was losing weight because he played so hard. And so I was able to see that. And it's like, I want to be like that. I want to be known as the guy. And even just a week ago, I was talking to somebody. I just met somebody that knew my brother. He said, I can get up on Ryan when I play tennis, but I can never beat him because he just tries so hard. He's such a hard worker. And that model for me, I tried to incorporate that in football. And I had this additional realization when I was at BYU. I was trying to improve my hands in pass catching. I'd been a running back and I switched to receiver, and I started paying attention to the guys who had the best hands. And what I learned was it was the ones who had the best hands who practiced the most. And this is, it's kind of like, I could have thought like, oh, the guys that have the best hands are the ones that don't need to practice, but it was the opposite. It was the guys who had the best hands who put in the most work. So I really appreciate that lesson.
Yeah, no, and just sort of to build on that, I completely agree. And I don't think it's just that there's this magical element of working hard. It is through the reps and the hard work that, in fact, that talent gap, if you will, is made up. And I think there is an atrophy for those who may just be gifted. Boy, and then you really talk about the people that are exceptional, like beyond belief. It's those who have the talent and the work hard. I mean, that's when you get sort of beauty. So anyway, so that's the first thing I think, hard work. And I hope that as we work with students or our children, that we're able to remind them of the value of hard work, because I do think it's a dying virtue, which we've embraced smart work maybe a little too much. So yeah, thanks for that, Nate, for that. The second one, as I mentioned, was sort of someone's view of themselves. And I think I hope that this idea of humility in an era where building confidence and self-confidence and self-esteem and self-promotion, really, even in the social media sphere, that those things become the calling card for people who are labeled as successful. And what I've found is I've watched people around me who I really admired and looked up to for successful individuals. And I don't just mean success in virtuous ways. I mean really success even in kind of measurable ways in business and in academia. I think that those who really transcend, who are really above kind of the average, those people all share one thing in common, and that is that they have a sincerely held sense of intellectual humility. And by intellectual humility, I mean someone who actually has both an appreciation of what they really bring to the table, but also what others bring to the table and an appreciation for that. The person that I think of the most when I think of intellectual humility, and someone who has that in spades, is the president of BYU, Kevin Worthen. You'll meet in your life probably no more remarkable human being. This is someone who clerked for the U.S. Supreme Court, who has been a dean of a prominent law school, who has been a president of a university, who, when he walks into the room, people immediately recognize someone who's wise and who's accomplished. And yet, when you talk to him, he doesn't for one moment hold himself in that light. He's confident. He carries himself with a sense of contributing to conversations, but he's humble about what he has to offer. He sincerely values what other people have to offer to a conversation. He acknowledges and validates what their contribution is above his own. The miracle of all of that sort of intellectual humility, in my opinion, is that by so doing, he sort of has lifted himself up unintentionally, but by recognizing others' contributions, by recognizing how they've contributed to an effort. And so I think when I think of those who are exceeding or punching above their weight from the talent spectrum to the success spectrum, it's hard work and then this intellectual humility. I'm amazed by those who have that characteristic.
So on the podcast a couple weeks ago, I had Don Moore, who researches overconfidence, and he comes at it in part from this angle of so many people talk about, think positively, and it's all about enhancing your self-esteem, your confidence. And his book is titled Perfectly Confident, and it's all about accurate calibration. And I think one of the reasons why we need this humility is if we're not humble, then we'll never take feedback. And for anybody to reach their potential, like, we need feedback. And this is a lesson. I've got a former teammate of mine who says everybody needs a coach because everybody needs somebody to tell them when they're being stupid. And that's kind of the coach plays more than just that. But in football, every single practice is recorded. Every play from every practice is recorded. And then you watch every play from every practice and you break it down. And it's monotonous, but you improve and you learn to take feedback. And, I think President Worthen, as an example, if he goes into every room acting like he's the smartest, he's not going to get feedback. He's not going to see his blind spots, or it just slows growth. So great example and great lesson.
Yeah. The one more thing, as you mentioned that I thought of, Nate, is the great volleyball coach from BYU, Carl McGowan, used to run what he called the cauldron. The cauldron was where they literally graded every single touch that every single volleyball player made during that practice, and then they gave them feedback on what their production was during practice. So it forced you to practice like you played, and it involved having a sense of humility and getting that feedback from a coach. And players that were not inclined to take that feedback then never got any better. And guess what? They also didn't end up playing very much, even though, again, they might have walked through the door as the most talented person in the room. But I think that the good coaches recognize the value in that humility and the feedback, and good players who want to get better end up having that same value system. So,
and I think we're seeing more and more CEOs have personal coaches because everybody can use an outsider view on helping ourselves to improve. So,
yep, absolutely. So those starting with those two, and then the last one I think is kindness. Again, maybe it's an old school, old fashioned virtue, but I think kindness. The thing that I thought about most, I remember I was driving to work one day. This is sort of a non-sports analogy, but I remember there was a music artist, and I think since it was on the radio, I could probably say who it is. Sam Smith. People wouldn't maybe know who Sam Smith was, but he was like at the peak of his ability at this point. I mean, his stuff was on the radio and on a variety of different radio stations. Downloads were, crazy high. And someone who was interviewing Sam Smith, and he said, people think of you as this really nice guy. You've got this great successful career. Most people start to really kind of inhale when they start to have those great successful careers, and they often don't think about other people, but you're always known as someone who is kind. And he said, the reason I feel that way is I'm going to need those people to be kind in return to me when I start the downhill turn, because I know I'm going to hit the downhill turn at some point. And certainly his career isn't today what it was then. But I thought, man, what a powerful lesson in the need for kindness. When things are going well, it's incumbent on us to be kind to one another. But the crazy thing is it ends up paying dividends, that kindness, in the good times and in the bad times. and I love to watch people who will walk into a room and everyone knows they're the biggest personality in the room, and yet they're kind and walk and find those who are maybe the least among them to talk to. I remember I was in a meeting, and I think he'd be embarrassed if I named him, but there was a member of the Quorum of the 12 who was there visiting this meeting. And he said, the thing I really like to do at the end of these meetings is I like to go down and I like to help pick up chairs at the end of the meeting, because those are the people that are there at the meeting staying after. And those are kind of the bedrock of those who are attending this meeting. And I remember thinking what a kind gesture that was, and how I hope that in all of my interactions that I exhibit that kind of kindness. And I always find myself sitting back in awe and appreciating people who have embraced kindness.
So I've never heard that story about Sam Smith. Is this the same Sam Smith that sang "Writing on the Wall," the soundtrack to Spectre?
Yep.
So yeah, I do love that song, and Sam has an incredible voice. So such a cool story. It's like this idea of karma, right? You're gonna reap what you sow. Like what you put out in the universe comes back to you. I was talking to my sister-in-law over Christmas, and I was sharing this story about how I had not been a good employee at a job I'd had and ended up getting fired. And at the time I was thinking like, this will never affect me. Like this will never come back to me. And then it did. Let's see. It was like 15, 20 years later that it came back to me. And she was like, see, like that stuff like this happens in the universe. Like when you put bad out in the universe, eventually it comes back to you or can't come back to you. But I like this idea of kindness. One, like, yeah, we can be kind so that it comes back to us, sure. But two, just be kind for the sake of being kind, and you're happier for it, and everyone else is happier for it. Well, these are awesome lessons. I really appreciate your time. I know you have lots of demands in your role as at BYU, as in leadership position, and still trying to get out research and service. So just want to thank you for your time, Shane. I love these lessons and look forward to trying to apply them and sharing them with others.
Well, thank you, Nate. And I'll say that I'm hoping that our Carrabba's lunches continue, because one of the things I would say is that I also have seen so many of what we just talked about in you. I mean, I really think as a football player, as a person, some of that, the hard work, the humility, the kindness. Those are all characteristics that I think Nate Meikles has embraced. So I'm grateful for the opportunity to visit with you, and wish you the best luck with this endeavor. Especially, it's a great endeavor.
Well, that's kind of you. We'll turn this into a little bit of a love fest, because you didn't even get into your accomplishments as a statistician and all the work you've done with Olympic teams and professional teams and professional coaches who everyone would know. So again, I just really appreciate your time. Thanks so much, Shane.
Thank you, Nate. Appreciate it.